We're live at 9:56, even in the morning. So how's everybody doing? Get your projects done. I'm getting ready to go down and do some projects myself, so I'm very excited about it. Always excited about testing, and there's just something that makes you feel better about having something that's not done and then getting it done. So in my case, I obviously have lots of testing to do. I have a couple of engines to put together. I have one like the 2.2 liter Dodge that hasn't run yet, and I want to get it running. So I'm hopefully, because the thing is with these motors for the dyno, once you get them running, if you get them up on the dyno and get them fired up, then after that, then good stuff happens. That seems to be the big hurdle is getting them all together, getting all the right parts and making sure they're there. Once you get it running, and then you can start testing. Like I could start throwing testing at left and right. We could do intercoolers and turbos and cylinder heads and intake manifolds and all the good stuff. So we can do lots and lots of testing. So I'm excited about that. So those are my projects that I want to get done. I might also bring the big block down to West Tech and try to get the short block assembled, which is not going to be too hard because it's all it needs is a little bit of ring gap, and then we're kind of ready to go. But the thumbnail that I put up is the massively powerful 1 liter Chevy Sprint turbo motor. And it's a really good illustration on the extra effort that I went to make everything so that we could improve the power. We had run this car at the Maxton Mile and set a few records with it, and in fairly tame daily driver street trim, all we did was basically turn the boost up. Now I did put an air to water intercooler on to get rid of the air to air deal, which is a good idea, especially for Bonneville. We configured it with a little reservoir and heat exchanger or not for Bonneville, but for the Maxton Mile. We were getting it ready to go to Bonneville, but for the Maxton Mile, I didn't even have a heat exchanger on it. We just I rerouted it. I had one on when we drove it around and just daily drove it. I had a secondary heat exchanger, I think it was a trans cooler, an oil cooler mounted in front of the radiator. And so when we would drive around, it'd keep the temperature, near ambient. It worked out really well. But for when we were running it at the Maxton Mile, I just disconnected that and had it go directly to our reservoir that had ice water on. So we had that upgrade, which was good. But we had the stock turbo. I had a fairly free-flowing exhaust. It was pretty simple because we still had the factory ECU and stuff. We also put a bigger fuel pump in it, and I don't think we had bigger injectors in it at that time. I think we had the Kenny Bell booster pump on a Civic Si fuel pump in there. That was more than enough for what we were doing. But here's the thing. After I got back, we decided, hey, look, if we put a little bit of effort into this thing there's no reason we can't make lots of power and go fast in this thing. It should be fairly simple. So I started experimenting with different turbos, and I did a compound thing. We did some fun stuff. And despite the fact that you can see the list that I have on the intro for this, and that's it. We upgraded the turbo. I put a little I think it's a GT20 Garrett turbo, a really nice one. One of the nicer turbos that I've had that are not, these cheap things I normally run. So that was a really good piece. It had the air-to-water intercooler. The air-to-water intercooler was already oversized. It was way more. That intercooler could support 400 or 500 horsepower, and we were at 100. So it had very little drop and had very good temperature drop. It was very efficient. We had the head had been ported because we were not extensively, but we were doing it actually with an eye toward fuel economy. So we were concerned primarily with low lift stuff. It had a big, and you can see in the photo, big 3-inch open exhaust coming off of the turbo. So that was super efficient. I made a little dedicated tubular header to mount that turbo. I think it was a T25. And then an external wastegate for that. So it had, all the things that it needed. It had enough fuel pump, enough injector, a big turbo, a really good intercooler. It had all that stuff on it. And when I say it had all of that, it had almost all of it. What it didn't have was really the ability to tune it. Now I could have the air fuel kind of be what I wanted, because we could I had a rising rate regulator, a 1-to-1 or 2-to-1, or a 1-to-1, 1.5-to-1, or 2-to-1, depending on how I configured it. We could set the static pressure. It was an adjustable regulator also, so we could set that. So I could get the air fuel curve kind of where I wanted it. But because this thing had a factory vane meter, not only was it restrictive, but it was just limiting. I mean, we couldn't get this setup working, and it would just immediately peg the vane meter, obviously, because it's designed for, the thing is rated at 70 horsepower. So we were, 110, 120 with this turbo, quite a bit more. 100, I think with that GT20, we made about what the compound did, was in the 150, 160 range. So it would just, even though I tightened the vane meter up a lot, we put clicks in it, that it would just, it would get to a point where it just snapped this thing open. And so I didn't have the ability to go in and do what I normally do. So even though we had the right plug gap and we would list off all of these things that were the positive things that we had, it only took one thing to make this so that it didn't work. I could probably get the air fuel that I wanted, but I could not get the timing that I wanted, and didn't even know what that was. All we're doing was setting an initial timing deal and putting good gas in it, and putting ice water in our intercooler, and kind of hoping for the best. Now, it did have a vacuum advance and boost retard, so it was doing that. And so that's probably ultimately what saved us. But we could not dial in the air fuel and timing the way that I wanted, and the way that we normally do on the engine dyno. The reason that we run a standalone management system on these things is so I can make it be what I want. If I don't have the ability to do that, and especially if we don't really know what it is, you're just taking a chance. And the more that you raise the boost, the more problematic that becomes. Yeah, it might be safe for a pull at 7 pounds because you missed timing by 2 degrees. But as you go up in boost and you miss the timing by 2 degrees, it's going to be more problematic. And did you miss it by even more? Because both the vacuum advance and boost retard have limits in the amount of swing that they can make. There's a limit to how much rod movement and plate movement that they have. I don't know what that total is. I didn't science that out. But what this thing really needed was some kind of standalone ECU that would work on a 3-cylinder, so that I could have it be, so that our limitation would only be either the turbo, or the inlet going into the turbo, or the discharge side, or the cylinder head, or in this case, certainly probably the factory camshaft, fairly mild. And, I know that we can keep applying boost to it, but I'd much rather have it be happy and efficient. So a nicely done ported head, and then a camshaft for this thing probably would go a long ways. And then as long as I could have the thing run at 11.5 to 11.7 to 1, and as long as I could have it run at the timing where it needs to run at, then we could, we're not going to make a ton of power with a 1-liter turbo, but it's going to make a lot more than it did. And, it's all a relative thing. If this thing went 119 miles an hour at 110 or so horsepower at the tire, and we could have this thing be 150 or 175 or even 200, which I think is possible with head studs and a good head gasket and a ported head and a cam and stuff. I don't see why that's not possible. And if you could get this thing to go, if this thing made 200 at the tire, that's going to be 150 plus miles an hour for this thing. So it'd be a lot. It'd be kind of a fun deal. And it doesn't really matter what the ultimate number is, and what for us, because this was a top speed thing, a top speed sprint turbo. It doesn't really matter what that is, just as long as we're making it better. But it's hard to do that if you don't have control over all of these things. So my point is, if you have a project car and you get an LS or a Magnum or anything from the wrecking yard, and you got a turbo for it, you got an intercooler for it, and you get injectors and you get a pump, but you missed on the tune, that's going to be a problem. And we didn't even run this thing on E85 either. So there's certainly more power to be had. E85 would have helped this thing along quite a bit, and again, give us more safety margin. So make sure that it only takes one bad thing to make this wrong. Like if we would have had especially on this ignition system, if we would have had, because we had to bring the plug gap way down, I think it was 15 or 16. If we would have had too much plug gap in it, then it would have just misfired, and which is not an issue because it's not really going to hurt anything. It just isn't going to make power. But if that happens during a record run, or even worse, you've already made a record run and now you got to do a backup, and it does it during the backup run, then you have to start all over and then set another record. And if you're going to have problems, that's the kind to have. Too much timing is not really the kind of problem that you want to have, because too much timing, that will usually kill the motor. And also more so at Bonneville, or when you're doing something like a standing mile or whatever, because you're on the throttle for a lot longer. A lot of combinations for drag race will get away with a turbo combination, will get away with having a lean mixture, especially if it's momentary, but you can get away with having a lean mixture. If you're on the throttle for a minute, a minute and a half, or 2 or 3 minutes in a sprint, in the case of a sprint, because it takes a long time to go, if you're going 110 or 120 miles an hour, it takes a long time to go 3 miles. But if you're on the gas for that long and under load for that long, and you have the wrong air fuel, it won't tolerate lean mixtures. Then it will usually scuff the pistons, is what happens. They'll get bad, they'll get hot, they'll start to scuff, and then they'll start to scuff more and start to scuff more, and then they can sometimes just lodge themselves in the cylinder because there's so much transfer between the two. It gets really bad. So the point of all this, missing on one thing, that's really all it takes. And if you're looking at all of these things, it's a good idea to prioritize them. Do you have an intercooler? Yes. Is it the ultimate intercooler? No. Do I need to fix that? Well, you don't need to fix that before you need to make sure that you have the right tune in there. Before you make sure that when you put the motor together, everything is right on it, all of your rockers, or all those things. There's a priority list that you'd have to go through, and the very important things need to be on the top, and then the lesser important things need to be on the bottom. And don't sweat these things, and don't focus on these things all the way at the bottom of that list because they're easy. Focus on the things that are really going to matter and get those things done. I wish that we could, and we tried running a fast on this and we weren't able to get it to work on this 3-cylinder. And I think we may have tried one other ECU. I think Tom was helping me back then on the Sprint, and we just weren't able to get it to work. And I think we also tried maybe putting an ignition amplifier on there, because it could certainly use that. And I think we put a hotter coil on it as well, because you need all that spark energy, because you got boost. Because we turned the boost up in this thing, I don't know, maybe it was around 20 pounds or something. Big turbo Sprint power. See what you guys got going on this morning. JPL, what's up? I saw your message, JPL. I want to talk to you about those heads. I think I just wanted to do another set. I don't want to ship yours back and forth. I just want to. I mean, you should get yours done and put them on your car. I want to get another set done. Big blocks. You can reach out. Bulldogs porting. Yeah. JPL. Like I said, I don't want to. I mean, if I can help you out and you can get your stuff done, that's fine. But I don't want to use those heads. I want to get another set done. When we see the chili bomb, the chili bomb can be run. The 2.2 liter Dodge is a perfect test to run that chili bomb on. You plan to test out the new BTR cam for the LT swap on LS? No, I think that's a tiny little market for guys that would want to go through everything that you need to go through to put an LT1 head on an LS. I talked to Brian. We've talked about this years and years ago, because we were thinking about the better example for me would be to do it on a 5.3. Because if you can take off a 5.3 head and put on an L83 head, and it's a big change in power, that would be good. But the problem is you got to change everything else. You got to change the head and the rockers and the camshaft and the intake manifold and the headers. And at that point, that's just too much stuff. It'd be much better off. You'd be much cheaper just porting your LS heads. So I don't know how big of a market that is, but I can certainly do a story on the stuff that they did at Brian Tooley Racing. Richard, can we see something like a drag build from you and kind of use it like a demo of what heads do versus each other in real life testing? I don't really understand what you mean by that. I have literally thousands of videos on this channel that demonstrate exactly what parts do. There's hundreds of cams up there, and it shows that the dyno test shows you what the cam does. And what it does there, if you add power with the camshaft, you'll see that out at the drag strip. And I have combinations up there to show you what things go together. There isn't any magic combination that's going to be better than anything else. If you get a 231 cam from one guy and a 231 cam from another guy, chances are they're going to be pretty comparable. If you put ported heads on, and we've shown that when you put ported heads on a stock motor, it doesn't do very much. Put ported heads on a motor that has compression and a cam and a good intake manifold, you pick up lots of power. So all of that information that you're asking for right there is already up on the channel. How dependable can adding a turbo versus NA be? Since there's lots and lots of factory turbo combinations, they obviously feel confident enough that the turbo combination can be every bit as reliable as an NA one. Monday's good. Chili bomb would work for 2 Metro Power or Sprint or whatever. Yeah, the Sprint Turbo. Yeah, it would be good for that. It's a little too much. It's probably more flow than we would need for the Sprint. The Sprint already had a good intercooler on it, but the Chili bomb would be good for maybe a low horsepower single turbo. Well, I take that back. If you had 2 of them, they would be good for. I think that they would work fairly well for an LS. At a reasonable power level. The thing that I can see that I don't really like are the size of the inlet and outlets of the water feeds for these things. So I don't know how much water flow we'll have. I wonder how much boost is safe for stock cam and springs 5.3 iron block. The cam and springs are not going to be your limiting factor. More than likely, your ring gap is going to be your limiting factor. But we've run, between 7 and 10 pounds on stock cam stuff and stock spring stuff. I have a Gen 3 LQ9 6-liter. I'm putting Gen 4 rods in it with the old pistons. You should check the balance on them. Yeah, there's going to be a difference. Who cuts the Jag sloppy stage 2 version cam? I have no idea who does any of their cam grinding. Sean's in Florida. Welcome. Turbo Centro, fix the fueling and timing. 20 degrees at 6,500 and no knock. That's nice. It should make a lot more power than it did at 5 degrees. 12 PSI feels like 20 PSI with a better tune. Tune the VCT. Nice. So does it feel like it's making more power now? I want to add a turbo. I want to make it a daily fun truck. You can add a cam, but there's no reason that you can't. Take a look at the channel and see. I have turbos that we've run with stock cams, and it works well. It responds well, and it picks up power. It's just that the thing is at 10 pounds, let's say, you're going to make another 150 to 170 horsepower at that same boost level if you put a cam in it. But pick your cam wisely. I would always recommend a smaller, mild cam. Don't pick a stage 2 or 3 or 4. Pick a stage 1 cam. Like the Truck Norris cam for a 5.3 is a good application for that. Have you done any testing with TSP Chop Monster Stroker cam? Nope. I don't know that I've ever even heard of that. I'm building a 415 stroker, ported heads, Chop Monster Stroker. I wonder if it would increase from. I don't normally recommend increased rocker ratio. I don't recommend you changing the factory rockers. I recommend you keeping the factory rockers on an LS. I want to see the 4-cylinder with the LS head on the dyno. That would be cool. It doesn't exist yet, though. Richard, do you ever put pressure transducers on a motor to see where the flow choke points are? Like, Ron, give me an example of where you would want to put pressure transducers at. Sounds a little complicated to pick a cam for a turbo for me, but I'll have to take my chances. Superior, you just want to forget about it being a turbo. You want to pick the cam for the things that you want the cam to do. Do you want to run with a stock converter? How do you want it to sound? How do you want it to idle? What kind of fuel mileage you want to get? All of those things. The turbo will just be along for the ride. It will work with whatever camshaft you pick. What we're saying is you just pick a mild camshaft so that it drives around nice and gets good mileage and has good idle quality. And the other thing that we'll have when you pick a cam like that is it will have better turbo response. But a factory cam will have that too. Recal. Put in the Summit truck cam at 8720. I wouldn't recommend a 218, 227 cam. Not for a stock 5.3. For the Chili Bomb, what about a 3800 twin charge? Yeah, that would be good. That would be another good application. You could use, yeah, if you want to use it in between the turbo and the supercharger. I thought you were talking about a twin turbo, and with, because that's the one that I would like to see, because I don't know how much flow capacity the Chili Bomb has. We'll have to see how restrictive it is and what the pressure drop is. But for a twin on the 3800, where you're trying to look for, let's say 700 or 800 horsepower, so let's say that it's a lot, but that's only 300 or 400 horsepower per intercooler, which I think is reasonable for that. I guess you can put any component on the flow bench, you get the same answer. The thing is, Ron, since this is a dynamic equation, a change in flow or some kind of flow restriction is not necessarily the thing that's going to limit power. A good example are intake manifolds. You can have an intake manifold that flows less, that makes more power, which is typically the case with the long runner and short runner manifold. Sometimes the short runner manifold flows more, but it usually makes less power through most of the curve. So it's not just a flow thing. Honda, let's see. Good afternoon, buddy. Honda friend, just showing some love. I do like Hondas. Matt's, if you guys are talking about Matt's best cam, it's smaller than the Sloppy Stage 2. And I think I have a video up. I know I have a video up comparing it to the Truck Norris cam, because it's like a 219 cam. The Sloppy Stage 2 is a 228 cam. So you guys have been here long enough. You should be able to guess what happens. It's a smaller cam, so it makes a little bit more low-speed power than the Sloppy Stage 2. The best should make, and it does, make less than the Sloppy, or makes more torque down low than the Sloppy Stage 2, but less peak power. Cool, Centra. I'm glad it's working out for you. Twin Chili Bombs, twin turbos. That's what the 3800 needs. That's what the 3800 Big Bang needs. It needs 2 smaller turbos and then 2 Chili Bombs on it, right? So that you can, because twin turbo makes more power than a single turbo. Let's see. Would the Summit 8701 Stage 2 cam work well with a twin turbo setup? It's going to depend on a lot of things. It's going to depend on it will work and it will make power, but what is it you want the cam to do? Do you want to have good low speed response? Are you trying to make 1,000,000 horsepower? What size turbos do you have? What is your power goal? What is your response needs? Is this a daily driver? All of the other questions are much better questions than will that cam work with a twin turbo setup? It will absolutely, because any cam name that you put in there will also work with a twin turbo setup. Can you put an intercooler on the flow bench? You could, given the amount that intercoolers flow, though. It would be weird because unless we put radius entries on it or something, I don't know. We could see the difference between two of them, I guess, if we flowed them in the same manner. I know I do want to do the K24. I want to revisit that. It's been sitting over at Skunk for probably more than a year now. Best cam is very close to the Summit 8720. Yeah, and I wouldn't recommend that. I would recommend a smaller cam usually for a 5.3, especially if a guy wanted a stock converter. 351 Windsor AFR heads, mild cam. What's better for towing, a stroker or boost? I don't know what you mean by better. Got to run to the store and the post office. Where can I see a chili bomb? And I don't know who sent me the chili bomb, and if whoever did, thank you very much. And please let me know, and I will return it to you. But they are available. You won't see it listed as a chili bomb anywhere. That's a David Freiberger coined phrase for it. That's his description of it. That's his naming of because it looks like the cherry bomb muffler, but it's an intercooler, so they call it chili bomb, which is perfect. But I don't know what it's called, but if you do searches for like oval or round intercoolers, it should come up. 2.25-inch dual pass intercooler piping too small for a 6-liter. It seems like it would be, maybe not for 700, but I would want it to be smaller than that. Yeah, for a stock converter, you definitely want a small cam in it. Power versus reliability and temperature when towing. Cost seems similar. I feel like the tune becomes more ultra critical on turbo towing applications. And I think that I just tend to think that it's going to be maybe put more temperature in the trans and stuff. But, I might be wrong. You do more testing with a 4200? Yes. If you take a look at the intercooler test that I did, we ran the 2 intercoolers with the Pro Charger. That'll give you an idea on what a restricted intercooler does. I think all of the sizing information is in the video. It was a really good upgrade, and it worked out fairly well because we were near the flow limit of the D1SC supercharger. Superior, so you like the chop, and if you had a turbo, it'd make you happy. So if you want that kind of cam, the Truck Norris actually is going to have a little bit of that. But as you get into having cams that have that, you get away from a stock converter usage. Did you receive the Vizard head? No, but he did ship it out. It may be at Westech. I'll have to see. In fact, I'm glad you reminded me. I have to send David. Send David. Okay. Okay. Have you seen the video posted by Greg? Something discussing a head with Ardema and Braun. No, what engine family is it? Alan, on your 212, 224 cam, you had to change the stall on it? I don't know what the stock LT1 Impala was. I don't know what the duration was on that camshaft. Was it like in the 190s? Five seven Hemi stroke to 6.4, 8-to-1 compression, 214, 233. What's the duration on that thing? It's probably not very high if it's a thumper cam. I want chop, but not a cam. A 214, yeah, it's not going to make power, especially on a 6.4. Salvador, you can put that in there. I think with that compression, well, it's a 6.4, so it might not be too bad. I'm just worried about how the thing's going to feel down low. A homemade head for a 1300 horsepower 6-liter NA V12. Okay, is it like a Ryan Falconer kind of setup? Superior. Okay, so you put the Corvette servos in there. That's one of the normal upgrades for that 4L60. I think the one in my truck has that Corvette servo in it too. Okay, yeah, Salvador, if you don't mind that, because it's going to be 8-to-1, that's going to be lacking a little response from that anyways, and that might be compounded by the cam. If you have a long runner, and since you went up in displacement, that's going to improve things relative to a 5.7. So it might not be too bad. Do bumper mounted intercoolers drop air temp in the summertime? Yes, because the inlet air going into the motor is elevated. So it's all relative. So if it's 100 degrees outside and you have a 100-degree air temperature going into the motor, and if you have an open element filter under the hood anyway, your air going into the motor is going to be way over 100 degrees. And then if it's boosted, you're going to be multiplying that. And then the intercooler, you're cooling it with a 100-degree transfer medium, basically. The charge temperature is always going to be way over that. So an intercooler is going to be a good idea even during the summer. It's possible to put an LT1 intake on a 9857 L31. It won't bolt right up. But anything is possible. Stock LT1 cam is a 203, 210. It's probably a wide LSA though, right? On the LT1 cam. Alan ported heads will help. Burnout. You'll notice when you set the intake manifold on there, the bolt holes are not going to line up. I don't know if they're in different positions and or different angles on the LT1 versus your L31. Chevy 5.3 LM7, is it worth board over? If you want to make more power, making it bigger will definitely do that. And that's not uncommon to bore it out that far. What is the best place for wastegate boost reference? What I use is the intake manifold. Some guys like to run it right off the turbo, and I don't like to do that because, and that's one of the upgrades that we did to the Sprint, because it was taking the boost reference off of the turbo and not of the intake manifold. And all we did was switch that reference point. And because you have losses from the turbo going through the intercooler and then into the intake manifold, the reference now, the number is lower there. So what that does is it opens the wastegate later. So you have more boost. So it makes more power. That's why I like it there. I currently run a main vacuum line to a block. That's good. That connects my wastegate, blow off valve, and controller. would be best for the wastegate to be on the turbo. Like I said, I don't like it on the turbo. And also, if you have your controller and your controller is bleeding stuff, you're also bleeding if it's very close to where the blow off valve and the the wastegate's going to be the controller. But if for the blow off valve, you can also upset the opening of the blow off valve if they're closely connected. That's why we normally run them on like different sides of the intake manifold. But I like the idea of doing a big log. And if you're going to do that, just do them on opposite sides of it. Oh, Travis, that's a good point. That the L31 and the LT1 have different cooling systems. One's a reverse cooling. 452 Mopar RB with a solid flat cam. 284 at 50, 106 LSA. Okay, that's a big cam. It's not a lot of cam for a drag race application because that's what that is. That's not something you're going to be too happy driving around in. Richard, have you tested an LT1, LT4 hot cam? I have not. I had 3 psi different from the turbo to the intake manifold, and that's the thing. The more restrictive your intercooler and all of that plumbing and stuff is, the bigger that difference is going to be. Tim, just check it and see what happens. I mean, just hook your boost gauge up to your turbo and take a ride, go through the gears, and then hook your boost gauge up to your manifold and take a ride and go through the gears and go, oh, look, it's it's different. It is different. I was happy on the Sprint, got an extra pound or so, even in stock trim. Some guys insist on it because, Corky Bell's books and all these things online show that you run it from the turbo, and especially if they're running controllers, you run it from the turbo to this and this. And I'm like, if you do that and you do it from the intake manifold, that your boost is going to go up, right? No, that's not how it works. I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's how it works. You saw my car just works that functional and easy. It's just a vacuum line, man. It's easy to swap. I do have a Super Trick LT1 intake manifold that I hole sawed so that you can slide a distributor in it. It was a little more involved than that, but would mounting a spray bar on the bumper mounted intercooler and spraying water alcohol mix on the intercooler help? It does. It helps cool it. It helps cool it, and it helps for response rate for you to for the if it does heat up, because if you're constantly on boost and it's having to constantly take if it has 300 degrees going in and you have 100 degree air going in, over time it won't keep doing that. The intercooler will heat up. But if you spray stuff on it, it probably won't. What other cars are running in the 1 liter class at Bonneville besides a Sprint turbo? I don't know. You'd have to look and see. I thought Subaru Justies were in there too. And again, it doesn't have to be a factory 1 liter motor. You can de-stroke and de-bore the motor. Some guys even just don't run one piston in one of the cylinders and make it a 1 liter or 1.5 liter or whatever it is they're trying to do. Is that a Red Hot Chili Peppers tune? No, it's not. It's the intro for the videos. Yes, you'll have you'll have better cooling if you spray water on it. We would do that occasionally on the engine dyno when we had air to airs on them. We would take and we just run the garden sprayers, just pump them up and then make a pull. Just makes us feel better more than anything else. And I remember standing there during when we were doing chassis dyno stuff, when I was doing stuff with Dave from Tiny Avenger with a 2.3 liter turbo SVO turbo motor, and with he had a T-Bird intercooler on his. He had the intercooler upgrade, but I remember making runs and just standing above it with the air nozzle to get extra cooling. Have you seen Brazilian Opalas with 4.1 liter Chevy? They soup up natural aspirate. I haven't. I know in Brazil they do a lot of cool stuff. They do a lot of cool stuff with the inline 6-cylinder stuff. I don't know how they classify rotaries there. Did the STI come stock with water nozzles? It may have. I don't know. Having more intercooler than you need is always a good idea. It's like having more fuel pump and more injector than you need. It's always a good idea. You shouldn't put in just enough. Reno Unlimited radial race planes. I did get to see the Reno air races this year with my buddy Bernie and Jimmy. That was pretty cool. I hadn't ever been to one. It was pretty neat. Where should I look for the GT45? Online. If you just do a search for GT45 Turbo, about a bajillion of them will come up. That's a lot too. That's a technical term. Turbo Censure. I'm curious why you would think that your turbo is rated for 21 psi. We need more Big Bang videos. I agree with that. Can a 416 make 300 horsepower at 2800? Let's step into Mr. Wizard's laboratory and see here. I've got a couple of 408s and 416s that we did. The 495 certainly did. So, stroker. Okay, let's see where. This one is at 285. Let's see what happened when we change the camshaft. It made 285 with a 206 crane cam. I could get it to 300, but it would be it would take a custom intake manifold to do that. I think with a custom intake manifold and E85, I could get there. Manufacturer told me not to exceed 21 pounds or the life expectancy will drop. Curious about that. John, and this was a 408 that I was looking at. So a 416 would be better than that. It would be 8 better than that. I wish someone would have a complete turbo kit for my 2000 Chevy Silverado. Someone probably has one. Have you done a search for that? Are manual transmissions easier to tune because you don't have a torque converter? Well, if you don't have to do the trans tuning, then yeah, I would say that they are, because there's no transmission tuning going on in the factory ECU. I don't think. Maybe they're doing, I don't know, maybe they're recognizing clutch and stuff. But the one thing that you can get away with on the manual transmissions, you usually can get away with a little bit more camshaft and not have to worry about converters. Richard, if the intercooler is too big, you lose response. Not according to the test that I did. We put we did discharge tubes sizing and length, and didn't seem to change very much. I mean, there is some point where it's gigantic and it would be problematic, but not in the realm of what we're, because usually people put intercoolers in based on two things. You want to have as much as you can for cooling, but also as a fitment thing. You can't just have a gigantic one. Oh, we're going to switch over to live chat. Your max beating rod TO4E, paid $250 for it. And they're telling you that a TO4E would go to 500 horsepower? A factory T205 did like 29. And the amount of boost that you can run is going to be a function of your NA power output. So it's going to be a function of the flow rate of the turbo plus how much airflow the NA motor can consume. That's going to be ultimately determine where that is for any power level, and then any correlating boost level. It's going to be those two things. So if you're running, let's say 21 pounds on your Sentra with a completely stock one, that's one thing. And then 21 pounds with a modified one, those would be two different positions on a compressor map. Also two different impeller speeds. And, there's a lot of stuff to consider there. Recommendation for a 5.3 LM4. I'm ready to order a stroker kit. I'll be running 250 horsepower nitrous on a carb setup. I have a set of heads. Well, what is it you're wanting? Are you wanting a camshaft? Yeah, a TDO4 is not that. Burns, I'm with you. It seems like a lot. That's like GT3582 territory. A GT3076 or something like that might get there on a really good motor, but the TDO4s I thought were more like 350 or something. How's the Trophy 4-cylinder doing? I don't know. I haven't talked to him for a while. I'm going to be down at West Tech pretty soon, so I'll be able to ask him. Oh, and yeah, not 500 wheel horsepower. That's definitely GT3582 territory. Now I want to. Now, if I can get this, sprint motor running with an aftermarket ECU, then I definitely want to try this little Garrett turbo on it. Oh, 300 horsepower at 2,800. I was looking at 3,000, but I don't think it changed that much though. Yeah, it's the same at 2,800. Oh no, it's not. Oh yeah, 265. 265. That's a lot less. That's a pretty small cam. What is it? You know what we might be able to do? That's an AFR 245 head, which would not be the head that I would pick to make that sort of low speed power. Yeah, I'm pretty certain I could do that. This cam did have 21 inches of vacuum at 1,000 RPM. 206, 214, 114 LSA. I would pick a different cam than that. I might even, don't tell anybody, I might even be tempted to go to a single pattern cam. That's right. You heard it. All right, Superior, good luck. Tell the guys at Brian Tooley Racing, if you talk to them, tell them we sent you over. Can you do a stage upgrade to the M90 experiment? What, I don't know what you mean, Sean. What are you talking about? I was told by the manufacturer it was good to 400. I'd have to see what size the wheel is and everything to tell you if that's true. Yeah, that's the Disco Potato is the one I was thinking of. What stroker do you recommend? Well, I don't know what you're talking about. Are you wanting to do, is this a 6-liter? Then you normally do a 408. If it's a 6.2, then you normally do a 415. If it's a 5.3, then normally you do a 383. Scott, I know you probably answered this a million times, but I've told you a million times not to exaggerate, but what fuel ratio do you shoot for at wide open throttle? On a naturally aspirated motor, around 12.8, like on an LS. On an LS motor, somewhere in the 11s, 11.5 or so. Alicia, I don't would you pick AFR or CHI if you had to? I don't know what you mean. Like somebody put a gun to my head and forced me to do it. The cam you have is a 232, 234 with a 114. So please remind me what it is you're trying to get done here, Jeff. Like, what's the goal of your thing? What size is the motor? Or is it running boost? And what are you trying to get done? What is the compressor inducer? The inducer is the small side of the impeller wheel. It's the one that you see when you look in there. And then the bigger one is the exducer, and it's reversed on the turbine side. Maybe enough building a 383 small block Chevy for my 95 5.7 TBI dually. If it will, are you asking if it will work? Well, 383s obviously work. The problem is you're going to have is getting enough fuel to it. But maybe if you use the big block one, that's enough. And can you do programming with it to make sure it gets the right amount of fuel? It's not just going to be right by going to a bigger one. I don't know what GM is doing on their V8s. They don't contact me and tell me what's going on. I wish they would. I'm out of the loop. Milo and I, huh, Milo? And the puppies. A 25G 640 at the tire, that's a lot. Let's see. I don't know. Are both of those have availability? I don't know what the availability is, and I don't know what the application is. And I mean, they're both really good heads. I've used CHI heads before, and they work really well. There obviously isn't as much in the way of intake manifolds and stuff for some applications to go along with those heads, but the heads themselves work good. It's a 50 millimeter inducer and a 76 exducer. Way to go, Eric. Got the motor snowmobile. That's awesome. Do you have any experience? Have you done any testing with AFR Enforcer LS210 ASCAS heads? I don't think so. I'd have to look back and see if I did any ASCAS ones. Where's your video? It's up on the channel. Just multiply the flow rate. For a V8, just multiply the flow rate by 16. So if you have a 50-pound injector and you have a V8, so you have 8 of them, they'll support 800 horsepower. Because 50 times 16 is 800. And that's an NA motor. Oh, we didn't even have a poll, right? And now we only have 3 minutes left, so it's too late for that. Oh, so you have a 5.3. I don't know what stroker kit to get. I can't recommend one because I don't know. The Summit Racing Pro LS stuff is good. Scat has stuff. K1 and Wiseco and JE, all those guys have good stuff. I don't think you're going to go wrong with a stroker kit from any of those. Just get one that's readily available and hopefully is in stock. I don't know if are you running it on pump gas? Is it a drag race car? Is it a road race car? I'm already not thrilled about that camshaft, but it will work. What intake manifold is on here? Oh, Michael, I'm to blame for that. Got a suspension rebuild, planning a turbo upgrade. That's awesome. AFR seems to have stolen the CHI a little bit. Stolen what? The AFR has been in business a lot longer than CHI has been in business. And all of the CHI heads that I've tested look nothing at all like an AFR head, and vice versa. Turbo Century, if you're trying to get 500, if that's the number that you're looking for, a GT35 is going to be the way to go. Oh, stolen the spotlight. I don't think that CHI probably sells a fraction of the heads that Airflow Research sells. Any idea what a ported 85 millimeter B18C5 10-1 is? It an 85 millimeter bore and a 87.2 crank? Then it has the B18C5, the GSR, and the Type R crank in it, and you've gone to an 85 millimeter bore, which is normally bigger than most people go. Usually we go to an 84. And do you know what cams are in it and what intake manifold you have in it? And how nicely done was the porting on the head? Yeah, Vans, if you take a look at the videos I have up on 383s, there's a few different ones that we ran different camshafts in. But we have one that made 600, and that was a pretty good size camshaft. But any of those 231 kind of cams should be able to make 550 at the crank. Sandy, the dealer would retune for a 383. Will a GT35 go 500 at the wheels? I think it will on the right motor. Ellis, yeah, I do. Like I said, I like the CHI stuff. We ran them on I ran them on a hybrid stroker that I did. I ran them on the Boss 302. We've run them a few times, and they have really, really good numbers. Not just peak flow numbers, really good average flow numbers. And Kazi obviously did really well with those early on the Engine Master stuff. 10-hour port job. I don't know what that is. I've seen lots of guys ruin stock heads by overporting them. Stock Type R cams. I don't know. I'm thinking that's going to be sub 200 at the tire. So it's 160, 180. Yeah, I'm still thinking that's going to be sub 200. Richard, I have a Gen 3 LM7, Gen 4 rods and pistons, fast 102, ported 862s. The cam looking at is a 231, 239. That's a comp 459. Is this cam a bad choice for a daily? It's not what I would choose for a daily. I don't know what kind of transmission you have or what kind of stall converter you have, but that's a pretty good sized camshaft. It'll make a lot of power on that combination. In fact, that's the camshaft and kind of the combination that should put it up near, between 475 and 500 horsepower at the flywheel. But it's not the cam that I would have for a daily driver. Garrett sells a GT35 900 horsepower. Yeah, none of these are real Garrett things. So Burns, what is the size difference on that G35? It can't have the same inducer and exducer as the GT3582. It made 372 horsepower, 11 pounds. So I thought you were talking about an NA deal. It's really easy to make power on turbocharged B series stuff. It's true that the bigger the engine, the smaller the cam. Yeah, you can tame the cam shaft down. So if you have a 302 Ford and you have like that Extreme Energy 274 cam and you make it a 347 or a 351 or a 408, that camshaft will be much milder in that. It will idle better and stuff in the bigger motor. Looking to build a 4.6 double overcam B head in the summer, twin turbo car, goal 800 flywheel. We use 46 millimeter and 57 millimeter turbos on the 4.6. We did it on the 03 Cobra motor, but it's going to be the same on that. One more minute. I got to get going. I got stuff to do. Milo and I got stuff to do, huh, Milo? It's basically a GT45. That's kind of what I was thinking. 102 housing and T3 flange. So is it a T3, T4 hybrid kind of thing? And on that note, it's time to go. I got stuff I got to go. Thank you guys all for showing up. I will see you guys hopefully all tomorrow or tonight. I don't know, sometime. What ifs? What ifs?